Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. In this podcast, you will discover interviews with procurement and technical experts, business owners, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. These experts will help you to develop and grow, accelerate your career, improve your business, save money, and buy smart. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello and welcome to The Real Life Buyer. I'm delighted to welcome my next guest, Maggie Perotin from Toronto in Canada. Having worked for 14 years in a large global company and worked her way up to Director of Operations for Service Excellence and earning an MBA from the Jack Welch Management Institute, Maggie is now a full-time international business and leadership coach, helping service-based entrepreneurs to generate the income they want and become authentic and high-performing leaders in their businesses. Maggie has created her own coaching model called Dream, Plan, Do that helps her clients align their mindset, business skills, and high-performance habits to transform their business to become a client-attracting gem with high levels of consistent income. Maggie is also the host of the weekly Diamond Effect podcast to deliver motivation and different perspectives on running a thriving business. So, without further ado, I welcome Maggie onto the podcast to discuss her coaching model, tease out some of her wisdom on leadership, and discover how she went about launching her coaching career. Hi, Maggie.
Hi, Dave. Thank you for having me. What a great introduction.
I hope it's fully accurate. So that's good.
Very accurate. Thank you.
Excellent. So you've had quite a journey, and I guess there's more to it than I just alluded to. So thanks for joining me right now. But you started your life in Poland.
Yeah.
Would you share the highlights of that journey that led you to becoming a leadership coach in Canada?
Yeah. So highlights of the journey. Was born and raised in Poland, still under communist regime. I was about 11 when it collapsed. So I still have some pockets of memory of that time that some are fun, some are less fun. And, so I did graduate from university in Poland, but that was under democracy. Let's just say Poland getting into our way into the more developed world. And as I was leaving university at that time, the unemployment was very high, about 25% on average in Poland. Wow. And that was a price, I guess, as a society we had to pay to go through the reforms that were required to bring Poland up to, let's say, the developed country. And I did have a job. I was in a big city, but it wasn't well paid. $300 a month. It's not going to get you far when you have big dreams of traveling and maybe owning a house and things like that. So I found out from a friend, actually, I was doing a postgraduate translation school, English, Polish, English. And there we had a conversation with a friend and she mentioned about Canadian immigration program. I learned about that and I thought why not? That's a great idea. I speak English, I speak French, I'm young, nothing is holding me, no mortgages, no kids, no nothing like that.
Yep.
So I applied for that program and a year and a half later, I was a permanent resident. So that allowed me to immigrate to Canada. And I always joke that I actually immigrated without ever flying a plane. So my first plane ride ever was on the way to Canada immigrating. So clearly I haven't been to North America before, but I do love diversity. I'm very curious. And I was the worst can be the worst that can happen. I would just come back, right? When you are illegally immigrating, worst case scenario, a couple of years, whatever, I would just come back to Poland.
Sure.
But I loved it. I love Canada. I love the diversity. I love the people here, especially, Toronto is such a melting pot. And as I came, I landed a job in a facility management industry. So in a corporate world, and I sort of grew my career there because it was sort of interesting. I said, I'm curious. I like to learn. I don't like to be bored. And trust me, in this industry, you don't get bored. There's sometimes more than you ask for or can be. So I grew my career in that industry. I changed employers at some point, but same industry. And very quickly, I became a people leader. I had a great mentor and manager who believed in me, who hired me in the first place, and then sort of mentored me throughout a few years and helped me become a people leader. And I discovered my passion for it. I discovered that I loved coaching and developing people, seeing them grow, seeing them move up in their career, and really discover the potential that they always had. It just, we tend to not see usually the potential that we have. It takes somebody else sometimes to see it and kind of bring it out with us. So I sort of love that part. And what I also discovered that the higher I went in the corporate world, the less of that I was doing. So I could have been good in other things, like go here, fix that. Here we have a problem. Here's a fire. Go and do that. So about 4 years ago, there was a situation where I really burnt out, and it wasn't like systemic. It was just more of a like period of time and the role that I was in. And it got me thinking, like, do you really want to continue your career in the corporate world? And the answer was no. I didn't. I have a young family, and 4 years, of course, ago, they were even younger. I was like, I don't want to be put in the position, whether it will repeat itself or not, but I don't have a control over this to some extent, where I have to give up my balance, my family life, and even my like mental, health or my physical health for that. So then I thought like, okay, well, what are you going to do? Right? Like, you don't want a corporate life. That's great. But you still have a mortgage. Now you have kids. You gotta pay the bills. So that's where the idea of coaching came, just because, again, I've coached and developed people for many years. I'm really good at it. I love it. And then I love business as well. I have the executive MBA, and I've done many different things throughout my career. I think it's very creative. Creating solution is fun. So I sort of merged that, and that's how I became a business coach.
That's great. I guess as you travel up the corporate ladder, you become more distant from people in some respects. And you obviously very much like to interact on a day-to-day basis with people and see them grow and thrive, as you said.
Yeah, you know what? Very often, unfortunately, corporations don't realize that actually it's the people and that connection with people what makes a difference and actually grows. And very often leaders get put in other ideas, like when other things to do, and that leading people becomes this afterthought as opposed to the other way around, right? Yeah. And I was always of the opinion that the other way around was more important. I did that to the best of my ability, but it still wasn't, for me at least, it wasn't enough.
Yeah. No, I understand. Okay, it's really, really quite interesting. And the one word I picked up on when I was looking through your details and your websites, etc., was the words authentic leader. And that's used quite a lot now. Perhaps it's overused by some people. What is meant in your language by being an authentic leader?
I think it's really being yourself, not putting wall of some appearances of who you think people want you to be or you should be, just being yourself. Being vulnerable and sometimes admitting that you don't have all the answers and that you need, your team's help. It also means treating your team members are intelligent individuals. And if there's things that you need them to implement or you need to implement that just don't make sense, saying that up front. I was always a big believer, like when there were things that we had to implement and I didn't necessarily agree with them, or I thought there was a better way, but there was for whatever reason we had to do it, I would tell that to my team. I would never lie to them, not in a negative way, but in a way of respecting their intelligence and knowing that they would notice anyways,
Yeah.
So I think it's just being that and being and just developing a connection with your team members, like a personal connection, right? It's all about relationships. So when you're authentic, you care about others as a human being and not just, as an employee or some sort of tool to a goal, right? To achieve a goal.
Yeah. I guess the culture of the company you're in makes a big impact on that. I guess if you can feel you've got the freedom of honesty to talk to both your people and your people talk to you in an open and trusting way, I guess that goes a long way to bridging the gap, would you say?
It does. It does go a long way. And when people trust you to come to you with any challenges and ideas and so on, it really builds a strong team. It builds a high performance team. And ultimately, everybody wins in that environment because people feel like they're heard, their opinions are valued, and it doesn't mean that their opinions or ideas are always implemented, right? It's not always possible for many different reasons. But when people feel like they're valued and their opinions valued and they're cared for as human beings, It just creates an incredible atmosphere. And with that, like people are able to thrive.
Yeah.
And that, again, it's a win-win for everybody. And you're right that there are companies where maybe that's harder to do than others. But I also found that when you're a leader, you can create that within your team, even if maybe outside that's not the case. Yeah, it might be harder for you as a leader, right? Because then if you have to go outside and interact outside of your team, that could be different. But within your team, there is an extent of freedom where you can do that no matter what.
Yeah, I guess, and to feel that you're able to disagree with something in a way that you won't be chastised or thought of badly for doing so. You're being honest, and you're trusting your leader to be able to make those sort of statements and get them. Yeah.
Perfect. And you know, like in today's world, nobody knows it all. There is no leader who can just do everybody's job and so on. Nobody knows it all. So really, you know, utilizing your team members and their brain and their intelligence and the way that they do their job and understand their job to the point where you don't, it just really benefits you as a leader as well. So for them being able to come and, as you say, like just say things as they are without being scared of, you know, being chastised or losing their job or whatever, it's the best thing you can do for yourself as a leader as well.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's the best thing if you do for your company. It's that honesty is what sometimes is needed, not just to go along with what the leader is saying, because that's just the way things are. You just do what you're told. So that's very refreshing. Great. Now, when I looked at your coaching model, you refer to it as being creating a system in your business that will help you attract paying clients consistently and predictably. I guess that's what we're all looking for. Yeah. So perhaps you could take a dive into your Dream, Plan, Do coaching model and kind of lead us through those key things that are intricately woven within it.
Okay. So a dream really stands for ideas and thoughts and beliefs, right? Everything always starts as a thought or as an idea, right? Nothing has been created the other way around. We have an idea, we start a business for a business, and then we started. And the key to making the best decisions from those ideas is making those decisions that are founded on belief in your ability to make them happen, right? But also that are founded on sort of aligned with who you are as a human being, with your mission of your business and so on, and founded in some knowledge. Right? Like when we have a skill and we have some foundational knowledge, it's so much easier to make a better decision. So that's sort of dream. And then plan is a part where I've seen a lot of business owners skip. So they have an idea, they think it's a great idea, let's go and implement it. Let's just go for it, right? And what happens is, yes, you know, that type of methodology is definitely could be effective, but it creates very often a lot of unnecessary troubles, challenges, things that could have been avoided if only a little bit time was taken to kind of think through things and prepare, right? So planning is preparing the execution of that idea in the best manner. And that means, yes, planning for the best and how we would execute that, because then what happens is when we create time and space for our brain to plan, we activate creative brain. We activate solution-based brain, and it will predict certain things that could go wrong that we can prepare for, right? So prepare for the best case scenario, but also prepare for like a medium and the worst case scenario. So if certain things happen, it's so much easier to handle them, right? We're prepared as one. And that portion plan, I always tell to my clients, it doesn't have to be a lot of time. It depends on the decision you're making. If it's a simple decision, it could literally be 2 minutes. Okay, instead of just having an idea and reacting to it, let me pause, think this through, and choose my response or choose my action. It could be 2 minutes. Now, if it's a big complex project, that might take a little bit longer to plan and prepare. And then, so once we have that plan, and then we come in an execution, then I'm a huge proponent of high performance habits. And, you know, I became a huge fan actually 4 years ago, because when I did burn out, I decided that I wanted to do something about the situation. There was things I couldn't control, but there was things I could do. And one thing that I could do was to sign up for some high performance coaching and become even more effective with the time I had, right, for my work and so on. And implementing good habits like grounding yourself and starting a day on a grounded, not stressed out, in a grounded, not stressed out way, and planning ahead, a week ahead, not a day, not having a never ending to-do list, but prioritizing and all those things changed my life. It allowed me to be so much more effective without overworking, without compensating for my lack, let's say, either of planning or just not being grounded and kind of like in that executive function of the brain with time. So what I do now, I help my clients do that. So in that doing and execution, it's not that preparation, but also in a way how we execute and how we go about the business day to day.
Right. Okay. Now, one of the things that I remember in my old days when I was at college, there's the plan, do, act, check cycle. Now, in this case, the thing that was missing clearly was the dream element. And hearing you talking about planning, you also, it sounds like contingency planning as well.
Yeah.
So now that's something slightly different. People often plan for doing something, but they don't always think about, well, what happens if this goes wrong? Or what happens if this deviates from where we are? So quite like that element of it. And then obviously you've got the doing, which we all need to do. And then you've got the checking. And I would always add to the thing that's missing for me was the refinement. So once you've done it, you know the results. Now it's time to go back and refine what you've done again.
Yes.
So is that an extension of what you do in your model?
Yes, that's the extension of doing. So part of the high performance habits is evaluation on a regular basis and looking back and seeing what worked, what didn't work, what can be done differently, just because I believe that then you, even if you fail or even if things don't go your way, you're still moving forward because you're learning for the next time, right?
Yeah.
So when you have an idea that's truly aligned with your goals and vision, and then you plan it. So you create a strategy that's based on some knowledge. And again, like all the vision and so on. And then you implement it in the best way possible and learn from it. You're always moving forward towards your goal, right? Even if you have a theory, you put it out there and it doesn't exactly work the way you want.
Okay. Now, one of the things, obviously, that aligns with the leadership is you have this wonderful dream, you've got your plan, which I assumes you've done with your team. The thing for me is, where's the connections between your team? How do you convince your team, for starters, that this is a great idea? Or how do you work with them to develop the idea and then get them on board and keep them on board? Because quite often, we've all been in corporate and these wonderful strategies come out and it's just cascade.
Yes.
And then the next strategy comes along and then the next one. And we've not actually completed the first. So, what is it that in your way of working makes sure things get done, they get completed, and it keeps everybody energized and on board and really want to drive forward?
So I would say there's two things. So there is ideas that, let's say, you didn't come up with and neither your team came up with, and you just need to implement them for whatever reason, right? So for me, involving the team and figuring out the implementation, again, being honest and authentic, why the idea came, giving them as much knowledge as you have. Of course, if there are some things that might be, confidential, then, you deal with that. But let's just say giving them as much information as possible, but involving them in the implementation, right? Okay, not the best, but here is we need to do it. This is why. How do we do it, right? And then again, when everybody contributes and when there's that trust developed, that's the best way. Like those are the best ideas and you create the best plan, right? And everybody has ownership of it because everybody contributed. Now, if there is an idea when you're creating with your team, of course, involve them as soon as you can, right? And get them to contribute to the idea because, of course, we all have our blind spots. We all have different perspective, different backgrounds, different experience. And there will be things that you will never think about that somebody else will, right? And the more of that it is, the better the idea. And again, the better the plan and the better the execution. But it does start on that basis of trust, right? And mutual respect.
Right. I guess one of the other key things is the communication element, because obviously you're communicating things out, getting people on board, but then it's keeping them involved and explaining where are we now? How are you guys doing? You know, what needs to be done differently, et cetera, et cetera. So that structure, I guess, needs to be in place as well to make sure that that's working well. Is there any particular tips you've got on that kind of communication methods?
For communication methods, as much as possible, it's never, you're never overdoing it. And I would say different communication. Again, it depends on the project, on the team, whether a team is local, whether a team is, spread out across the world. But the more you communicate, the better. Over communication is actually better than under communication, and in different ways. Because as you say, some people are visual, some people prefer hearing, right? Again, there are certain things that are better than in a meeting. Don't send emails that are 3 pages long because nobody reads them, right? Yep. So being creative, but over communicating rather than under communicating, right? And keeping people up to date, keeping people up to date with any changes, any shifts and so on, and ensuring that always the key people are on the same page, right? Because sometimes you're dealing with, let's say, when I had a team, I had managers under me who had the team, right? And the meetings weren't always necessarily including everybody, right? So making sure that the key team is on the same page, so then they can communicate properly to their teams, right? So there is, we could talk to here forever about theory of who should communicate what. But in a natural, simple, for example, a vision or the purpose and so on, that's always the highest leader possible should communicate. But then actions to what to do and why, it should be the manager of the team member because they have the closest, the tightest connection, right? So there is whole theory around that. But I would say simple rule is over communicate rather than under, and use as many means of communication as possible, just because, again, email is not the solution for every problem.
No, absolutely. Is there, without obviously betraying any confidences, is there a really good example of where you've taken one of your clients from level A into level B and seen a tremendous change? Is there anything you can share as a good example of this?
Yeah. So just one of the recent clients who has a teletherapy kind of business. So therapy for kids through online, mostly not in person. And when she came to me, she was in that thing when she was very overwhelmed because she was still delivering service, but at the same time trying to grow her team of therapists because she's growing. And it's sometimes business owners get stuck in that moment, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. I want to grow my business, but I don't have time because I'm working in my business and so on, right? So we started working together. The first thing we did is implement a little bit of some high performance habits, create a strategy to pull her out gradually of the business, not fully, but as the income grows and allows her to do that, but pull her out so she actually has time to think strategically and be the CEO and so on. And as we did that, of course, because sometimes people think if I don't go and service my clients, my business is not going to grow. Wrong. As we did that, her income actually started growing 63% over very quickly. And then we had time to look at things and evaluate. And when we did, of one of the assessments of 6 months, we identified things that could be improved. As we go, we improved some processes and so on. But then looking back, we identified another couple of things that are very simple kind of operational processes fix where income was leaking, even though it was growing. Sometimes we think, income is growing, it's all great. But if we don't look back, there might be income leaking from not tight processes. And that, again, we were able to do that. So now she's on a path to really big growth. She has some, creating some good collaborations with the partners that refer the kids and so on. And she's going to grow really well. So that's kind of one example of.
Right. Good. Now, one thing that's quite interesting here, a lot of people, they decide that a side hustle is something they really love to get involved in. But there are obviously a number of challenges and hurdles with doing that, just by the nature of it's a side hustle. And obviously one of those is navigating the fact that you're doing a new venture whilst working for an employer. Now, your story kind of aligns with this, and you faced this conundrum. So would you be able to share with us how you began coaching under these circumstances and then, transitioned into a full-time business? There's a lot of things going on there, and you had a lot of things pulling you around left and right. So how did you make that? How did you start doing the side hustle and work your way through to the fact then you decided it's time for me to go and do this full-time?
So I started when I decided I wanted to long-term, grow my business and kind of leave the corporate career. And the thing is, when they came up with the idea, it was kind of very vague idea. And I didn't fully believe. It was just like, okay, let's try, right? I have this theory that this could work, but I'm not 100% sure it could. So let's try. So I did clear the coaching business with my HR team, making sure that there wasn't any conflict of interest. And I also purposefully chose a niche where there wasn't any conflict of interest, even in coaching in niche, right? So of course, what I was doing, I was more an operational leader. Yes, I was coaching my team, but it was very different to the coaching business. But then I picked, small business owners and solopreneurs, service-based, when I was working corporation to corporation, not even business to business, but really corporation to government, corporation to big institution. So that was very clear that really there was no conflict. And then on top of it, I chose to market my business in ways that wasn't necessarily in the face of, the global CEO of my company, right? So I did choose not to market my business on LinkedIn at all and just find other ways to do it after hours and either a network after hours or like use, Facebook, Instagram, things where my company wasn't really active in, right?
Yeah.
So that allowed me to grow that on the side. And as I said, with the high performance habits, that's what truly helped me to be very focused, prioritize, okay, when it's work time, and I want to be very effective with my work. So I don't have to bring work home or anything, because when it's home time, there's family time and there's business time. And I eliminated everything else, right? Netflix, couch vegging during the week was gone. Okay? There was no Netflix other than like maybe a family movie time on a Saturday or on Sunday. Like that time, that was one of the times that I, regained to be able to grow my business. And I did, that was an intentional choice for me to, that's growing my business is more important to me than, watching a show. Right.
Yeah, sure.
So I started doing that for a couple of years. And as my business started growing, I also grew more and more confidence. That's like, hey, this could actually work, right? I have clients, they're happy, I'm creating results, this could actually work. So then it was a matter of making a decision and leaving my corporate career. I've had, a privilege to work for a company that was always growing, definitely not in challenge, even through COVID, it wasn't in a such bad situation where it was letting people go. I actually, got some promotions down the line and could get even more promotions if I stayed. So it wasn't a matter for me like, oh, maybe they'll let me go or whatever. No. So then there was a decision like, okay, I don't want to necessarily wait. There is a point where you just need to decide, because what's the point, right? Like you're definitely making some sacrifices here. So what's the point of continuing it forever? So for me, it was building up my confidence and actually like remembering my life and realizing that I've done crazy things, like, moving to Canada without not much money and not being before, and some other things in my life that ultimately I knew were good for me. And even though they were scary, and even though I wasn't 100% sure how it would turn out, they really turned out really well in my life. So trusting myself, but also creating a backup plan, right? Creating the plan like, okay, if I do leave now, and let's say my corporate income hasn't been replaced yet, and worst case scenario, I don't make any money for the first 6 months. Possible, right? It's possible I will, but it's possible I won't. What would I do, right? What is my plan? So creating that plan with the confidence gave me like peace of mind. Okay, I'm ready. I can leave, right? And then I get my notice and I left.
Wow. Yeah, it's still a huge step to make. If you're working at a high level, you're well respected, you've got opportunities, even more opportunities to grow in your career. That takes an awful lot of guts and determination to make that leap.
Yeah, you know what? It took me a few months to decide and be like 100% sure, because I also didn't want to come to my boss. I had a really good relationship with my boss, and I didn't want to come this flip-flopping, like maybe and so on, right? Like if I'm going to tell you and almost give you a heart attack, like I want to make sure that it's going to be, that it's the right decision for me, that it's thought through and so on. So it did take me a few months think through it, but also like overcome the fears that naturally come, right? With decisions.
Absolutely. So a few things that jump to my mind is you must have an awful lot of discipline. You're incredibly focused. You're able to turn on that focus tap pretty quick by the sounds of things. And you must have an extremely supportive family, people backing you to do this as well. I think without those three elements, it would have been incredibly difficult.
Yes, you're right. Definitely the discipline. And it's really like prioritization, right? Really being clear, like what's important to me, right? And then removing everything that's not. And that, again, I thought I was pretty organized before the high performance habits, but when I started implementing them and so on, it just took it to the new level. And that's why I really tell my clients and teach them that, because it's so powerful. So that's one. And then, when you do it long enough, it just becomes who you are. Right. Yeah. It just becomes who you are. And then, it's not a problem for me to say like, oh, I decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I know. I have no doubt. Like if I make a plan, unless something really unpredictable happens, but that happens like 5% of the time, not 30 or 40% of the time. Right. And then, without the support of my husband, it would have been, I don't know, maybe impossible or very hard to do. Just even in the phase where it was just moral support. Hey, you can do this. I believe in you. We'll figure it out. Even if, things don't go the way you want to, we'll just figure it out. So having that support is invaluable, I have to say.
And it's obviously very fascinating how you went about this, because there are a lot of people out there professing to be leaders, coaches, et cetera, and to get into that market with quite a bit of competition is no easy thing to do. So how do you go about deciding what was the thing that you were going to bring to the market that was different to everybody else? And how do you get that message across, particularly if the normal 9 to 5 time you're actually in a career? How did you go about bridging the gap and deciding those things?
So you're right. Coaching market is, it's how do you say, like, it's very easy to get in, right? So the competition, there's a lot of competition because there aren't any standards per se, but then because of that, it's very hard to get to a certain level and so on, right? Because of that. So some of it was through my experience, right? And understanding what it takes for a person to be successful, right? By coaching so many people for so many years, that it's not just a hard skill or knowledge, because the industry I was in, it was pretty engineer kind of technical industry. And I don't have any experience in that at all. Right? Like my experience or my education was in humanities and law and business and all those things, nothing to do with buildings or so on. But I've gained that experience, along the line. So realizing that hard skills can be learned. And it's not just that makes people successful. There's so much more to it. There is a mindset portion, right? So that dream portion, and then the willingness and drive and so on. So when I thought about my coaching model and I thought, okay, how can I make my clients successful? That was the thing that I looked holistically at them as humans first and then business owners, right? So human first. Okay, in order for you to be successful, you need to think in possibility, have the right mindset. You need to have a skill in business. And a lot of service providers, business owners, when they start, they don't, right? They have their passion for whatever service they provide. And that's great because it gets them to start the business. But in order to grow the business long-term sustainably, you need to have some business skill as the CEO. And very often they don't, but hey, I can teach you. right? So there was that. And then, well, high performance habits is just, part of my story, I guess. And I thought, like, if they did such a wonderful thing for me and helped me so much in my life and even how I feel and how I operate and so on, I have to teach it, right? So like those three things, that's what I decided from the beginning. But then the messaging of that and figuring out how am I going to talk about this in a way that people understand and understand the value, it took practice. It's really just going out there and being willing to be sucked in the beginning and not being able to put your message across and figuring it out over and over and over. That's really what helped me.
Right. And that's when you use the social media type of things to try and get your message, give out value in your content, I guess.
Yeah. And meeting people, networking, using social media and just putting it out there and trying over and over. How do I talk about it in a way that my ideal client will understand, right? And that really, transposes or conveys the value of what I have to offer.
Yeah. And of course, you worked in a high level job. You have to convince those people as well that, you can translate this into something that they can use.
Yes.
That must be quite difficult when you haven't necessarily in the beginning anyway, at least got the resume of clients that have achieved success.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing in the beginning. It's kind of like, I think it's Simon Sinek who says about the different types of clients, right? There's early adopters, and then there's actually not the early adopters. Before the early adopters is the people innovators, right? So the innovators, they don't need necessarily a big social proof. They just want to, hey, like there's this new thing, there's this new coach, like, let's try it, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of rely on that because you're right. Like I definitely didn't have social proof in the beginning. And I also didn't want to use my, let's say, corporate clients or my team members to say, hey, can you vouch for me that I'm a good coach or a good leader? I didn't use that at all. So not having a lot of network either, being an immigrant to Canada and not networking a lot in my corporate world, just, within the company I worked for, I found myself, okay, well, I have to build a network. I don't have it. I don't have a social proof because I can't really use, my employees or former employees. So it was relying on the innovators who would just believe me what I was saying to slowly start building the clientele and then gathering social proof this way.
So it's those personal connections. When people start to like you as an individual, to hear what you're saying, and they start to believe, well, actually, this person knows what their stuff's about. Yeah. And those are the first steps, isn't it? It's all about people, isn't it? Making that connection.
It is.
And no amount of emails and posting is going to make that until I think you're, face to face virtually.
Agreed. Like, it's very hard to develop the know, like, and trust factor through an email and so on. And especially where you're in the beginning and not have social proof, you're messaging, you're still figuring out how to message and so on. The best way is just get out there and talk to people for sure.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, I'm going to ask you one more question. But first, can you share with everybody now listening, how do people find out more about you, find out about your training, what you can do, what you can offer for other people?
So the best way is, of course, my website, stairwaytoleadership.com. A lot of what I coach, depending on, I have different couple of clients, but like through consults, I offer free consults where you can book through the website as well. And, in terms of my philosophy and what I'm all about and how I look at business, I guess the podcast Diamond Effect is the best way to just listen without having to talk to me, to know me.
Okay, brilliant. Well, so my last question, looking at time now, is obviously there are a number of people who have skills, shall we say, want to go down the route of coaching. And obviously they're going to face the same dilemmas that you used to face. So if I were to ask you, what would be the most important recommendations to kind of aid their success and avoid significant pitfalls, what sort of things would you share with them now?
So I would say, either if you have a skill through experience, just like me, that's great. Again, no certifications per se are required. But if you don't have an experience, then go out and gain some skill, right? Like whether it's through school, certification, or whatever. There's many different ways. And don't quit your job if you haven't started your business, because it can take time to to develop, to grow clients and so on. Again, it depends. Maybe you have a wide network of people who are all in need of coaching that you offer, and it could be possible. But before you quit your job, have a plan. There's many coaches that I know of that are kind of, work their business on the side. And then when they were ready, they left. First of all, I always want to say, you want to be in it for the passion and the why, not for the promise of whatever amount of money you can make or whatever, right? Like no matter what we do in business, there will be ups and downs. There will be great times and there will be times when you doubt yourself and you don't have a strong reason why you want to do what you want to do. So let's say in coaching, it's going to be hard to continue. So having that strong, knowing why you're doing it and having that strong pull, whether it's through your story or the passion, like me, of coaching people, like whatever that is, it's important. So have some skill and then go out there and talk to people, go out there and be the coach the best you can be. Yeah. And have a backup plan.
Brilliant. Yes, you have to have some grit and determination. You say if you love what you do and you enjoy what you do, then you want to carry on doing it anyway. You just don't want to say, I'm going to give up on that idea and I'm going to find another one. So absolutely, if you haven't got that drive behind you, then it probably will fail. Yeah.
It's like, would you do it for free, right? Are you so passionate about it that you would do it for free? And if the answer is yes, which is in my case, I could do it all day long for free if I could only pay my bills and so on, right? Then you have the drive, because as Dave says, otherwise it's going to be very hard.
Brilliant. Well, it's a great note to finish on. I think there's some superb information there. And obviously, I'm in awe of your journey. You've gone through some amazing things there, to change country, obviously you have a family, to develop a really high performance career. And then having the wherewithal to then say, right, I'm going to do it all on my own now, I think is an incredible story in itself. So congratulations for that.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Most welcome. And hopefully we'll speak again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.